like that. I like that. And also Dion Don Hopkins. No, Don.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host for tonight. This is my first podcast of the year, so if you're a new listener, you probably haven't heard my voice, and you're scared because I'm not the normal voice. My name is Nick Walsh. For those of you who don't know, I'm here with my good friend, my fellow analyst, my fellow California resident now. We're on the same time zone, which is pretty cool. I'm here with Matt Rogers. Matt, what's up, dude?
What's going on, Walsh? It is good to be in California and back on the podcast. This is my first podcast of the year as well. So you're right. If there's any new listeners, they might just be like, wait, I don't hear Don like breathing heavily and Vinny yelling at him. Like I must be listening to the wrong podcast. No, this is the right podcast. Walsh is the smart one, and I'm not the smart one. That is pretty much all you need to know if you've never heard us before.
I don't think that's correct. I think you're pretty smart.
You fell into my trap of compliments.
Yeah, there you go. That's the trick. Be self-deprecating, and then the other person is kind of forced to compliment you. I do it all the time to make girls compliment me. It's great.
That's a great strategy. I hope that's working out for you.
Yeah, it really boosts my self-esteem a lot. Anyway, guys, we're gonna get into some things today, but first, we'd like to give a quick shout out to Vupiq. The Vupiq is the revolutionary app that allows you to play fantasy football live while watching the game on TV. Predict the plays, the results of the play, and literally play fantasy football. You can sign up for the beta now by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Vupiq. And that's VUPIQ. So that's like app spelling or whatever, where it's like the word, but it's not the word. So that's Vupiq. Definitely go check them out, guys. What Rogers and I are going to do today is go through a mock draft that we did. Today is the 16th. We did this mock draft on Thursday, which would have been the 12th? The 13th. Yeah. The 13th. Yeah. So if you're listening to this at a later date, just know that we did this now. So don't be like, why'd you guys take Melvin Gordon in the first round when he blew out his ACL in the first day of training camp? It's like it didn't happen yet. And hopefully it doesn't happen. I don't want that to happen to Melvin Gordon. That would suck. But just keep those dates in mind as we do go through here.
We also have some potential. Oh, sorry. I was going to say some potentially pending news with like Ezekiel Elliott and some other stuff that, this is like a very popular time in roster changes and depth chart changes. So we're going on information, to your point, as of like the 12th or 13th. A lot of things are going to change.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that we formatted this, first of all, we did 15 rounds. It is a PPR draft where you are starting one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a flex, one tight end, one defense, one kicker. A lot of us didn't draft kickers because, like, what's the point? Like, what would that do for you, the listener, as an exercise, like seeing what kicker we took in the last round? So that's kind of how we went about this. It is a 12-team snake draft, and the way that we did it as well is that there were 6 of us on it. It was myself, Rogers, Vinny, Don, and Shrek, and then also good friend of the show, Ed. So there were 6 of us in on this. We each drafted 2 teams and sort of went through building those teams independently, trying to make the best teams that we could. Rogers, you got anything else on the format or anything like that, or should we just dive on in?
No, we can dive on in. But first, I was just going to say, I assume that this draft, too, will also be posted with the podcast, so you can kind of look along. It'll be hard to follow, I'm sure, the teams completely just with, hearing them. But there'll be probably a link posted with the entire draft results. And also, before we get started, I just wanted to say a common misconception is that the fantasy football season has not yet started. It's halfway through July. It has started. It is mock draft season, which is personally my favorite because nothing has gone wrong yet for you individually, and you are still very, very hopeful, and anything can happen. You have the same odds today to be your fantasy champion as you do as everybody else in your league. So get started now. It is never too early to mock. It's important.
That's very true. Very true. You go through and just kill some mock drafts, and you're like, "Fuck yeah, I'm real prepared," and then just mess up your entire draft.
Right. That's the other shoe that falls to
right. But that shoe is about a month and a half away, so don't worry about it now. Yes. Also one thing I would like to say with mock drafts, just in general, a piece of advice on those: don't do the same strategy. Like if you're doing multiple mock drafts, like going up to this, don't do the same strategy for every one. Mock drafts are like, I know a lot of people who will go in and be like, yeah, I did like 12 mock drafts and I ended up with like these same 4 guys on like 11 of the teams. You know, it's like, what are you doing there? You shouldn't, like, there's no point to doing multiple ones if you're going to use the same strategy every time. Try different things out, see how you like your teams in the end of it. There's no downside to trying things now rather than trying to do them in your actual draft.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. So let's go on through what we're going to do. We're going to talk through the first 2 rounds of this just to give you an idea of the order of the picks. And then from there, we're going to go through team by team. We'll run down the players that were drafted, and then we'll talk about those teams. We have written answers from the guys about their teams to questions that Rogers and I put together. So we'll go through some of those, try and really get into their mindset, talk about the construction of the team, and then some player specifics as well. So round 1, we started off. Pick 1 was Ed. Ed took David Johnson right off the bat. No qualms with that, really. Pick number 2, Don took Le'Veon Bell. Again, those guys are going 1 and 2. Pretty much every draft in some order. Pick number 3, Rogers, you took Ezekiel Elliott. As you spoke, there's some stuff with the suspension there. But yeah, what was your thinking there? Just kind of next best player on the board?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I feel like the first 10 picks this year are relatively scripted in some sort of jumbled, order. But yeah, for me, it was just Ezekiel Elliott. Regardless of the suspension, I kind of put that aside until more information comes out. But after those first 2, I feel like, it's kind of a clear-cut situation as far as he could be the best back in the league as far as football goes. So hopefully that, continues to translate over to fantasy. It's just the safest pick to me before this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with what you're saying there. He warrants that 3rd pick. 4th, Shrek took Antonio Brown. 5th, I took Julio Jones. Those are both pretty self-explanatory there as well. 6th, Vinny took LaShawn McCoy, which was slightly interesting over Odell Beckham, but I certainly don't fault him for it. And Vinny's kind of always been a guy who likes those running backs early, likes to really anchor his team around a running back. And LaShawn McCoy's a great guy to do that. I don't really see the separation between those first 3 and him that much. Let's see. 7th pick, Ed. So this is going back through to our second teams. So with the 7th pick, Ed took Odell Beckham. Again, completely understandable. 8th pick, Don took Melvin Gordon. 9th pick, you took Mike Evans. Talk to me a little bit about that relative to AJ Green still being on the board.
So the main reason is Mike Evans is actually a guy that there's some leagues where, based on how you choose the draft order, I have an opportunity to go in between 4 and 6 range. And I'm considering dropping to right around 7 because Mike Evans might actually turn into a guy that I'm targeting in the first round, hopefully as late as I can get him. Because last year he was the 2nd wide receiver overall. Granted, he had the 12 touchdown year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And, that may not necessarily be replicated. But, he was ahead of Antonio Brown. He was ahead of Odell Beckham, and they played the same amount of games. So, I don't see it's so rare that the wide receivers actually finish in the order that they're drafted. Obviously, the bunch at the top is usually pretty, clear cut. That I'm just as happy with Mike Evans 3 picks later than if I were to get Odell or, Julio Jones, somewhere like that. I mean, Deshaun Jackson's there now, and there's a couple more, OJ Howard's coming in and creating a lot of hype. But, I think that could just, give him more opportunity and maybe a little less double coverage. So I'm really up on Mike Evans this year.
I completely understand where you're coming from there. The Deshaun Jackson thing is huge for me. I'm a big believer in those deep threat guys, those guys who can stretch the field, really opening things up for other receivers and just making the offense better as a whole, even if their game-to-game stats aren't necessarily there. You can kind of equate it to a guy who takes a lot of threes, or a guy who can hit a lot of threes in basketball. They open up that floor. They provide bigger driving lanes for other players, or in this case, bigger. Basically, you're just getting the defense more stretched out. I think it benefits the whole offense a ton. So I'm totally with you on that. Going forward, the 10th pick was AJ Green. Shrek took him. I took Michael Thomas with the 11th, and I just really didn't know where to go with this pick. To be honest, I took Michael Thomas because I think he's good, and I think he's clearly the number one there for Drew Brees. I didn't love it. So it was kind of just all right, let's give this a shot more than anything else. I don't know if I would have made the same pick if I had to do that again. I think what I learned there is I don't like the 11th spot because, as you said, I think the top 10 picks are pretty clear cut. And then at the 11th, you've got a little bit of ambiguity there.
Right. See, the first question I actually had written down, you kind of touched on it, but we may as well go right into it. I was going to say 11 seems like the first real crossroads there. And at first when you did it, I knew that it was kind of I just really like this guy, but more at like 14 and necessarily 11, in a 12-team draft, the first overall, your first overall pick. But, if that's your guy there and that's all sort of, all those guys are a dime a dozen as far as, what their floor and ceiling and risk and reward. So if that's your guy, I don't really hate the pick if you're really high on Mike Thomas. I mean, it's preference at that point, right?
Yeah, it's totally preference among these guys who we'll discuss as, the next couple picks. You could I wouldn't even fault someone for taking Rob Gronkowski there, if that's your guy,
Right.
It's just kind of, and he's going towards the end of the second round in most drafts. But there's a lot of ambiguity there, as you were saying, and it's really sort of just a bunch of guys sort of in a pile. Maybe they'll shake out a little bit clearer as we get closer to the season, but just kind of take the dude you want there. It seems like.
Because after AJ Green definitely starts that second tier of the next 8 wide receivers, and trying to figure out which of them will be the best and the worst in that second tier is throwing darts blindfolded. So it's just pretty much your preference, I would say. I agree with you, but also you were trying to be a bit of a badass, it. You were screw it, Michael Thomas. I'm a reach because I love that dude. Yeah, no, I was totally just yeah, I'm gonna be bold here, fucking really do something, But yeah, that's definitely part of it. So moving on to the 12th pick, and then we'll come back around the turn here, go through the second round, talk about these pairings. So with the 12th pick, Vinny took Devontae Freeman. I hate that. I don't like Devontae Freeman this year, but again, it's preference. And then Jordy Nelson to pair with him, which I think is just fine. I took DeMarco Murray with the next pick. So again, pairing that with Michael Thomas. I wouldn't have I totally could have ended up with those same two guys, but in the opposite order, if that makes sense. I would have been fine with taking DeMarco Murray with the 11th pick and then taking Michael Thomas with the 14th. Yeah.
It's just kind of how it ended up. I generally like kind of being homogenous in my first two picks to really create a strength with a team. So that's a little bit weird for me. I normally don't like taking one of each in the first two rounds. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you like being homogenous there or kind of mixing it up?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely you feel safer in the midst of a draft, especially when you're on like you were the 11th pick, so you're kind of on the end of a turnaround there. So it feels good to just kind of chip away at each position and sort of establish a broad base. But I mean, I think it's a good strategy. Typically, I like to do it. I usually do it. And if I don't, it'll just be 2 wide receivers. But, it does feel good. And that was another question I wanted to ask you. So you hated on the Devontae Freeman pick, obviously, which I don't disagree with. But that would mean that taking DeMarco Murray there was he'll be your 6th-ranked running back. So is that what you think it'll be going into the season? Like, is DeMarco a guy that you really wanted there? Or did you just kind of feel like he was the pick that made sense?
He's the next running back on the board for me after Melvin Gordon. I felt like I felt like he was solid value there. I know I'm higher on him than most, which has kind of been the story of like my fantasy career, being higher than most on DeMarco Murray. But yeah, it's I like him a lot this year. Again,
it was also good that you kind of went a little balls to the wall, putting a sophomore receiver with your first overall pick. So you pick like a veteran running back to kind of hedge that a little bit. It just feels right when you're drafting. I would feel good after those 2 picks, even if I was uncertain about the Michael Thomas reach.
Right. It definitely felt safer than a Jordan Howard or a Jay Ajayi would have felt.
Exactly.
So that's sort of that there. Speaking of Jordan Howard, Shrek took him with the next pick. So his team, those first 2 rounds ended up AJ Green, Jordan Howard. I'm low on Jordan Howard as well. What are your thoughts on him?
I just think that offense is going to be very, very bad.
Yes.
So, not to say they were good last year when he got completely fed, but it's just I think that I do like him. He could have a very good year. I wouldn't be surprised if he, kind of repeated what he did last year. But at that price, it just feels weird, if that makes any sense. There's no quantifiable stats that I'm like trying to quote here. It's just like kind of a gut feeling where I wouldn't feel comfortable taking him like 14.
Yeah, I think it's risky. We've seen a very small sample size of him. He's in a very bad offense that just really only got worse over the offseason. What do we have on him? We have like half a season of him producing as a fantasy starter. So yeah, I think there's a lot of risk involved. You think back to like the Trent Richardsons or even like Doug Martin in his second year was like terrible, after like killing it his first year. So there's a lot of risk there.
For whoever would be the Bears running back, if I told you, you think a Bears running back is going to have 1,600 total yards 2 straight years, I'd be like, hell no, especially with the shape that they're in currently. So there's got to be some sort of regret. The guy had 1,300 yards on the ground last year. I can't see him doing that again. Yeah.
It's certainly it's within the range of possibilities, but sure. It doesn't seem likely. No. Just based on
that's more than David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell. Granted, Bell missed 3 games, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, moving on to your next pick here. You took Amari Cooper and paired him up with Mike Evans. That is a nice first 2 rounds out of the 9 slot, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I felt. Some people would go like T.Y. Hilton there or, Jay Ajayi, like we were saying. You could kind of balance it out as far as position-wise. But I really like the potential of sort of like a possession receiver and, a big play receiver sort of combined together. It just felt good and 2 young breakout. I still think Amari Cooper has a lot of breaking out to do. You would be the expert on that. But I think his best years are still way ahead of him. So I'm trying to get on the right side of that upside.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a guy who, we've seen. We thought last year that he was going to take over the majority of the targets from Michael Crabtree. He didn't do that. It's unclear really whether he's going to do that at this point. But it's been basically the same tale in that offense for the past 2 years, where Crabtree's the guy with more targets, more catches, more touchdowns. Amari Cooper has more yards. So right. He's a big play guy. He can get you those big play touchdowns occasionally. He's going to be a little inconsistent, but at the end of the year, he's going to, have very, very good totals.
It should also be repeated that, it's a PPR pick as well. I definitely would not be valuing him that high over the likes of, Dez and T.Y. Hilton and guys like that if this was not a PPR league. So keep that in mind.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, Don had the next pick. He paired up Melvin Gordon with Jay Ajayi. Don fucking loved this. Don loves both of those dudes. And Don went running back, and he got his guys. I have no qualms with it.
I have no qualms either. I kind of wanted to because he was so happy, and I want to just be like, bad job, Don, bad job. And then I was like, that's kind of cool in a 12-team league.
Yeah.
Don wins again.
Damn it. Yeah, Don actually did some good. So then moving on from there, Ed's next pick was Rob Gronkowski, and he paired him with Odell Beckham. That's a little bit higher than Gronkowski's been going, but I said earlier, like, I wouldn't fault someone for taking him with the 11th pick. Kind of shoot your shot on that one. And Gronkowski and Beckham, combined have the potential to put up like 60 points combined in any given week. So.
Yep, I agree with that. Definitely, people will always reach on Gronk that early. So, and it's not a bad call. Just, it makes sense that he goes there.
Yeah, absolutely. The next pick, Vinny took T.Y. Hilton. He paired him with LaShawn McCoy. It's fine value for me. You got anything else there?
No.
Cool. And then the next one, I took Doug Baldwin to pair with Julio Jones. I'm pretty high on Doug Baldwin as someone who thinks he is very good, and as someone who thinks Russell Wilson is going to do better than last year. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I've just always been a believer that Doug Baldwin cannot repeat what he's just done. It just doesn't make sense to me, and then he does it. So
right.
I've never been on the Doug Baldwin train, but I think that I'm a loser for it. So, I've never really owned him in any league, but I do agree the Seahawks should be better overall. I think they'll be a little healthier overall as an offense. I'm sure we'll get into that a little more when we talk about, Eddie Lacy and where he went and stuff like that. But one thing that shocked me, I may as well just jump into this question again that I had for you while we're here, was I know you like Doug Baldwin, but guys you've loved before in the past are like Lamar Miller went a couple picks after. Des Bryant, I believe, went the pick after, if I'm not mistaken. And, I was going to ask, is that just because you are really, really high on Baldwin, or did those guys lose your trust, or is it a combination of the two?
Kind of a combination. I'm very high on Baldwin this year. Dez is a guy who I fell in love with because of his physical traits and his ability to box people out in the end zone. He just doesn't get the volume that you really need. And I've been too high on Dez in the past, I think. So I've kind of fallen off the Dez thing a little bit. Lamar Miller, I think is, a fine pick. I would have taken him as the next running back off the board. But I like going wide receiver heavy early.
Right. And your other team too, you went wide receiver running back. So it makes sense to try a different strategy. Like you said before.
Yeah, for sure. So that was kind of the thinking behind that. Moving on, the next pick was Shrek taking Des Bryant, as we alluded to. So he paired up Antonio Brown with Des Bryant. That's a great pairing there. That should work out just fine.
Yeah.
And then your next pick was Brandon Cooks to pair with Ezekiel Elliott. Are you a big believer in Brandon Cooks this year? Is he one of your guys?
You know what it was? This was kind of a panic pick that overall I regret. But I will say that I'd taken Ezekiel Elliott to start, and I definitely wanted to go receiver here. And the next few guys that were up are Demaryius Thomas, who I've never really liked in recent years. I've never wanted to trust the whole Trevor Siemian thing. Keenan Allen, who's coming off a big injury, obviously, and then DeAndre Hopkins, who may have Tom Savage throwing to him, and we saw what happened last year when, hopefully it's Deshaun Watson, but, we saw last year what happened when he had literally no quarterback. He's not one of those guys that can overcome it. So I think it was more just the potential upside. And, the Patriots went and traded for Cooks. They really wanted him. So, I'm sure they have big plans for him. We've seen that bite Patriot players in the past before in the ass. But I think it was more just me getting really giddy about Brandon Cooks going to the Patriots and willing to take that risk, though I don't know if I would do it again.
That's fair. It seemed like, one of those picks where you kind of look around and you're like, I don't know what
Right.
I don't know which guy I want here. But yeah,
which is very common this early, and also possibly just this whole year with this clusterfuck.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of upside there. I've heard and read a lot of stuff about the target share not being sustained, like just not getting enough targets to really prop up that ADP. But like, if you're gonna have ridiculous efficiency, Tom Brady's probably the guy you're gonna have it with, right? So I
guess, yeah, you're right. Also, now talking about this, I'm remembering how Brandon Cooks complained that he wanted the ball more last year on the Saints, and like, if that were to be the case with the Patriots, I could see him just never playing again for Bill Belichick, like just like riding the man. Now that's just a worst case scenario. I'm starting to panic, but
yeah.
I'm just worried about target share now, Walsh. Stress me.
Sorry, man. Didn't mean to get you this stressed this early in the podcast.
Stephen Ridley flashbacks.
All right, let's move on to the last two picks of the second round, and then we'll get into breaking down these teams as a whole. So in the second round here, the next pick was Don taking Marshawn Lynch, paired him with Le'Veon Bell. I keep using that phrase pairing, and it makes me just think of like pairing like a wine with like something. Yeah, Marshawn Lynch is like definitely not a wine.
We could make a wine with an H and just be like future whining. Just like, what would you like to pair with your wine?
I like it.
A reach on a running back? Yes, goes.
Yes. What's your opinion on Marshawn this year?
I have no idea. I was hoping that you would be able to tell me. He scares the shit out of me. I definitely wouldn't be taking him before Todd Gurley and Lamar Miller. I think he would rank a little bit outside the top 10 for me, more like in that like 11, 12 range. But ideally, I don't have him this year at all.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. There are like so many reasons to be high on him and also so many reasons to not be high on him that it's just like he's a complete wild card that could end up being the RB1 for all we know, and also could end up like being a non-contributor for the entire season. So right. It's a very high risk reward situation. I don't fault Don for taking them there. I don't think I have the moxie to do it.
No, I definitely don't. And if you look at Don's team too, like pairing, if Lynch were to pick up right where he left off, and like you said, was like a top 3 running back, and he had him paired with Le'Veon Bell, that would win you a league.
Oh yeah, totally. That's the kind of league winning upside that you're looking for there.
Right.
But again, it could come, and this whole team is very risky in general, but we'll talk about that as we go through. So the last pick of the second round was Ed taking Todd Gurley. And again, his first pick was David Johnson. David Johnson and Todd Gurley, just fine, I think, for that.
Yeah, that's well done. Of course, Ed is the only one that isn't directly involved with the podcast and has his like 2 teams maybe the best. But again,
Ed did very, very well here. He was also not drunk or hungover. I think he was at work, if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow.
So that might be part of it. Maybe not though. I don't know. All right, so let's break down these teams as a whole. We're gonna start with Ed's team, that team from the number 1 pick. We'll run down the picks very quickly, talk about our general thoughts, and then read out some of the questions that we had for Ed and kind of what his thought process was. So as we said, those first 2 picks were David Johnson, Todd Gurley. In the third round, he went Lamar Miller, so 3 running backs right off the bat. Followed that up with Golden Tate, Julian Edelman, Tyler Eifert, Jeremy Maclin, Matt Ryan, Cam Meredith, Jamal Williams, Josh Doxson, Marlon Mack, Robert Woods, the Kansas City defense, and Matt Bryant, which don't matter. You said it. Ed like really killed this. He did really well.
I like the fact, I know you had a question about it for him that he answered, but just to gloss over a little bit, he got those 3 running backs right there: David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Lamar Miller, who I assume would be his flex. And he got Matt Ryan in the 8th, which I feel like overall, as far as ADP, is a bit of like a steal if you believe that Matt Ryan can repeat what he did last year. So that's good. It's just a good team. It's just well constructed, especially going running back heavy early. I think he did a good job kind of rounding it out with some veteran receivers.
Yeah. For that start, I really like his receiver core. I feel like he did very, very well in this. So the questions that we sort of had for him, and this, goes for it. The first question was, are you happy with your team construction having gone 3 running backs off the bat? And is this a preferred strategy for you this year? And what Ed said there was that he thinks running back is a good way to start if you're picking first, second, or third. He said running backs who have a guaranteed workload are so scarce that I think getting 3 of them gives me a huge advantage over the rest of the league. And he expects 20-plus touches a game from both his running back spots and his flex every week, which he doesn't think anyone else in this draft can hope for. I think he's completely right.
Yeah. Correct.
I think the biggest point out of that is that, if you are drafting in those first 2 or 3 picks, that might be the way to go. Just, depending on where the running back value falls in that second and third round. If you can get guys like this, if you can get Lamar Miller as your third running back, you should probably do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really great. But something is real quick, and then we'll get back to Ed's note. Is it sort of like is the running back early strategy sort of making a comeback? Because looking at this now, like Ed picked first and he gets David Johnson, obviously. And then I think everyone's so preoccupied with trying to get top tier receivers after, the AJ Green and Mike Evans, like we were talking about, that you let guys like Todd Gurley and Lamar Miller completely slip all the way to the beginning of the third round. And I wonder if really their value should be a little higher. Like with the fact that I took Brandon Cooks before Todd Gurley or Lamar Miller sort of makes me question my strategy there in the middle of the draft.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. There, you can certainly make an argument that guys with guaranteed workload like that should be going ahead of some of these guys who maybe are going to be a little more inconsistent week to week. The Des Bryants, the Brandon Cooks, the guys like that. I think it's worth noting that guaranteed workload is a thing, and these guys seem to have guaranteed workload, Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say another point to that is also, as we've seen, and if you've played fantasy football over the last 3 years, week 5 comes around and one of your flex positions are screwed. Wide receiver is way easier to fix than running back.
Yes.
So I almost want, I'm going to delve more into it the more I mock, but I'm wondering if, going on trying to get like some of these elite running backs in those first 2 rounds a little more beneficial. Because, for instance, looking at Don, getting that Melvin Gordon, Jay Ajayi combo, it's like he can just do whatever he wants. If his third receiver doesn't work out, or he can. It's just way easier to fix. I feel like than your first 2 running backs going bad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a something to keep in mind as you go through there. So the next question here, past those 3 running backs, you took 2 fourth-round rookie running backs. Are you shooting for general upside with those, or are you specifically targeting those players this year? And what Ed said was that he's just hoping for general upside. He said, I felt like I needed some backup RBs, and they both have the opportunity to be the main RB on good offenses. Williams has a better chance to become his team's RB1 than Mac. I thought it was interesting. Obviously, after you take those 3 running backs, you don't really want to invest a ton more in running backs, which would leave you naturally a little bit thin on there, but you have to do that in order to round out the rest of your team. Williams is a Packer. So, Rogers, do you have thoughts on him specifically, or?
Yeah, I mean, not really. He's definitely – all that they've really said about him preseason is that until the preseason actually starts, is that he's clearly their number 2 as opposed to Aaron Jones. So, Ty Montgomery certainly isn't a sure thing, and we saw him get banged up a little bit last year. So I agree with Ed. I mean, being that hybrid, wide receiver that's now getting snaps under center, definitely brings durability for Ty Montgomery into question. And, Jamal Williams is blatantly the number 2 on the depth chart. So we'll see how more sort of what more comes from this backfield when they start playing some, scrimmage games and stuff like that. But I think his reasoning is pretty spot on, to round out that running back core.
Yeah, absolutely. The third question that we had here for Ed was, with Matt Ryan coming off a career year, do you feel he was appropriate value where you grabbed him, which was the 8th round? And then were there any other quarterbacks you were considering in that spot? So what Ed said here was that he thinks Matt Ryan was a good value in the 8th. He considered waiting on someone like Cousins or Stafford, but no one else on the board jumped out at him. So he pulled the trigger on quarterback at that time and thought that Ryan was the best available. I'm a little bit lower on Matt Ryan this year than it seems like you and Ed are, but I can't really argue too much with his reasoning there.
Yeah, I agree. Ideally, I wouldn't want to take him in the 8th round either. But the fact that he was the 5th quarterback taken, that's okay in the 8th round, I think.
Yeah, that seems fair. All right, so the next question here was, are you confident with your wide receiver core going forward after waiting until the 4th round to select one? And what Ed said was, in PPR, I think Tate and Edelman are both solid floor guys who should catch 90 passes. Combined with my strong running back core, I'm happy with grabbing floor wide receivers. Maclin has a chance to be Flacco's go-to target, and my other wide receivers are upside guys. If one of them hit, I'm thrilled. And just to remind you guys, his other wide receivers besides Tate, Edelman, and Maclin were Cam Meredith, Josh Doxson, and Robert Woods. I, again, completely agree with him here. I think he did a great job. I'm also very high on Maclin compared to his ADP. So I thought that was a great pick and a steal where he got him there. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the only I agree with you too, but if I'm nitpicking here, would be Golden Tate in the 4th round as your first receiver, even though he's right on the turnaround there. Golden Tate completely killed people last year. We got to remember, and he went completely missing for some games. And the fact that he was even, a top 30 wide receiver, I think was a product of, huge weighted games where he would get like 25 points, 26 points and like completely blow up. But for the first 5 weeks last year, didn't get more than 7 PPR points once. And a lot of those were in like the 2 range. So he came on a little bit at the end last year, and you hope that sort of, he's riding the ship there, but that's just to me a huge risk. As a guy that owned some Tate shares last year, I personally wouldn't want to trust him that much.
Yeah, I think Ed's characterization there as Tate as a floor guy might not necessarily be correct.
Right.
But yeah, I kind of glossed over that a little bit just because I'm so high on Maclin that I think he'd end up being his starter over Tate anyway.
Right.
But yeah, so, and he is correct as well. Those guys, Cam Meredith, Doxson, Robert Woods. I don't know if Woods has the upside because just wide receivers on the fucking Rams.
Yeah.
But the other 2 guys definitely have some upside to outperform those ADPs.
I completely agree.
All right, and then the last question here. Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry. No, go on.
Okay, so the last question here about Ed's team, and then we'll move on. What made you go DJ over Le'Veon? And his response here was, DJ and Le'Veon are so close. Bell has so much injury history and suspension history that I give the nod to DJ. I'm not worried at all about DJ's knee injury in week 17. He was fine 6 weeks later. Yeah, I'd take DJ over Le'Veon as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there was a 90-point PPR difference between them last year, and Bell did miss 3 games, but David Johnson just gets fed, man. Just gets fed. And just like, suspension history and injury history, like Ed said, is enough. When you're splitting hairs on that level of 1-2, I think that's enough to go David Johnson for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Either way, you're ending up with a good pick there. So right. We'll see exactly how it goes. And we're going to move on to Don's team, Don's first team. So go for it, man.
Yeah, I'll give you a little break here, Walsh. I'll run through Don's team. Don also, for his questions, or for his answers rather, wrote novels. So it'll be a little bit bear with me here as I try and sort through them. But as we said, Don started off he had the second pick. He went with Le'Veon and Marshawn Lynch, which we liked, sort of. He ended up running 3 straight wide receivers after that, going DeAndre Hopkins, Martavis Bryant, who we'll talk about, and Tyreek Hill. So some risks there, but certainly not bad, especially going 3 straight. That's good. His third running back taken was C.J. Anderson in the 6th. Followed that up with Jimmy Graham in the 7th for tight end. Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans on his eighth pick. Then got Russell Wilson in the 9th. I'm sure you like that, Walsh, since you were just talking about how you're very high on Russell Wilson. Rounding out the bottom of his bench, you got Adam Thielen in the 10th. Then went Dion Lewis and Gio Bernard, who could be pretty good value there in 11th, 12th. Mohamed Sanu in the 13th, and then kicker defense, which we really don't have to get into. So pretty good squad from Don there. I think I'm going to read some of the questions you posted for him, Walsh. The first one, or first, did you have anything to say about that team?
No, I like what he did overall. We mentioned before briefly that this team is kind of very high risk, particularly in the wide receiver core, but we'll get into that a little bit with the questions.
Right. So, Walsh, the first question you posted for him, I will read. It says, you've been vocally against DeAndre Hopkins this year, Don. What made you take him there? And let me just get to this Don answer that may or may not have a glossary. Hold on. All right. So it says, although being burnt by Hopkins last year, I know that it is more Osweiler's fault rather than Hopkins. It even showed when Tom Savage played those few games, giving the looks Hopkins deserved. You think Don likes Brock Osweiler? But then he said, and whomever, Don, I like the grammar, whomever the quarterback this year, it will be better than Osweiler. And although Hopkins may produce what he did 2 years ago, he will certainly be better than he was in 2016. I think the wide receiver pool dropped immediately after Hopkins to the next tier of wide receivers, and not going back until the end of the 4th round and only having running backs, it was the pick I needed to take. I don't really hate Don's reasoning here. I think it's pretty good. Just to give you guys some context, the wide receivers that went immediately after were Keenan Allen, Demaryius Thomas, Michael Crabtree, Allen Robinson, guys like that. So I think that there was a little bit more to the pool than Don let on in justifying his pick, but I don't really hate it. What are your thoughts, Walsh?
Yeah, I thought it was fine value for him. It's just Don has hated him so much. But as he stated there, it was more of Brick Assweiler than DeAndre Hopkins.
I like that. And also Dion Hopkins. No, Don did not invest as much, in this as he did last year when he took him in the first round.
Yeah, Don Hopkins.
Moving on. Let me see here. What was the second question that we asked Don? So to your point of upside receivers. So like we said, he had Bell and Marshawn Lynch. Walsh asks him, your wide receiver core has huge upside, but also includes several risky players. Would you have taken any safer players if you could do this over, or are you happy with what happened? So Don responded with definitely a lot of risk, especially even more question marks with my bench receivers. I'm assuming he's talking about, rookie and Adam Thielen and stuff like that, rookie Corey Davis. But the way my draft strategy went, the safer picks weren't in the right round. So risky, yes, but I'm still okay with it. So Walsh, talk about these receivers. I know you have some opinions on them.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea of I feel like Martavis Bryant and Tyreek Hill both have a significant amount of risk involved in them. So maybe later on in those rounds, I would try and get someone with maybe a higher floor. But John just didn't do that at all. He went Corey Davis, who's a rookie. He went Adam Thielen, who I actually do like Adam Thielen a decent amount this year. And then Mohamed Sanu, who also just no floor whatsoever on Mohamed Sanu. So I thought, but I mean, I can't really fault him too much just because, say Bryant, gets suspended again or something, maybe Corey Davis hits and is a wide receiver too, so there's reasons, to avoid those floor guys as well and just kind of go for the upside. Don, he gave himself a lot of outs, basically. He drafted 6 wide receivers. So he only needs a couple of them to hit, I guess.
That's a good way to phrase it too, because he sort of made up for those first two running back picks with a lot of unknown, and some of it good unknown and some of it bad unknown. Like what's Martavis Bryant going to do with a full year? Tyreek Hill is now the number one guy in Kansas City. Like, will that hurt or help him? And as you said, Corey Davis is a rookie, so he does have high ceiling on his risk, but I just think that he's just completely at the mercy of the fantasy football gods with this team.
Oh yeah, totally. He's really putting himself out there. And Don's also the kind of person where if none of them were to hit, he would like be really mad and complain about it a lot. And it's like, dude, you totally did this to yourself. But anyway.
Right. So we'll go into the next question we had for Don. What are your feelings on Marshawn? As we said, he took him in the end of the second round. Were you happy with that pick at the end of the second round? Sorry, a little redundant there. So let's go to Don's very bet hedging answer. He goes, I'm not so down on Lynch as some may be, but also not so high on him either. Very insightful, Don, as always, giving you the info you can't get anywhere else. But he finishes the answer saying, but because I had Bell, I felt comfortable enough to take the risk on the hopes that the Lynch of old 2 to 3 seasons ago in a really nice system and offense in Oakland can come through. So, kind of what we talked about, there's certainly upside there. And Don has a good point saying the fact that, his first running back is such a sure thing when healthy, kind of gives you a little more wiggle room to go for that upside risk. But like you said, his team is really risky. One thing I will note, too, is that he kind of ensured that risk pretty well, I think, by taking C.J. Anderson in the 6th. A lot of teams that sort of had, risky running back cores, I should say, didn't really do as well as that, I think, as far as making up for it in depth. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the C.J. Anderson pick really, really helps sort of mitigate some of those things. He's, one of the latest guys going right now who is still technically a starting running back. We'll see what happens there with the, job security. But for now, C.J. Anderson is a starter. So, yeah, I like that. One thing I just want to point out with Marshawn, because we didn't mention it earlier, in terms of like his upside, he's playing behind by far the best offensive line he's ever had this year. And offensive lines are hugely correlated to running back production. So it's like I said, there's so many reasons to be high on him and also so many reasons to be low on him. That's definitely a huge reason to be high on him.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then the last question for Don essentially was you pointed out that Tyreek Hill slipped past his ADP a little bit. So again, his ADP is the fourth round, around the 9th pick, wide receiver 22, and Don got him a 5th round 2nd pick. So you asked, did he? Is it because solely that he slipped at ADP? Would you draft him at his ADP, or would you reach a little higher on him? And Don essentially just said that he felt the value was right there. Regardless of ADP, he thinks that the fact that he's the guy, the upside again, is worth the risk. So Don is shooting from the hip with this team right here. And I don't necessarily hate it, but it is what it is. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think he summed it up pretty well. Cool. Let's move on to your team.
Yes.
So your team here, we started with Ezekiel Elliott and Brandon Cooks, as we said. So from there, we went Keenan Allen, Doug Martin, Christian McCaffrey, Eric Decker, Tevin Coleman, Quincy Enunwa, Derrick Henry, Dak Prescott, Marcus Mariota, O.J. Howard, Ted Ginn, Torrey Smith, and the Green Bay defense. So there are a couple questions. I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier. Does the Zeke suspension thing really worry you, or like at this point it's just like I'm just going to take him at 3 anyway?
Well, two things I'll say that I kind of screwed up with a little bit, though, is I think the suspension definitely makes him clear cut at best the 3rd pick now. I've seen him go 1 in some mock drafts, and I think just the whispers about it means that he should be going 3rd or later, depending on your preference. Something bad that I did, though, that I didn't really realize until looking over it today is that my top 2 running backs are Ezekiel Elliott and Doug Martin, who was already definitely suspended. So I kind of backed myself into a corner there by potentially drafting two suspended running backs as my first 2 running backs, and didn't really get enough quality insured depth, I think, to sort of complement that. Like, for instance, my team right now, if Ezekiel Elliott were to get suspended for even, say, 2 weeks, and Doug Martin is suspended for 3, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
I believe 3. So that would mean Christian McCaffrey, which was a pick that I hated anyway and have not done at all in the 5th round, and Tevin Coleman or Derrick Henry would be definitely starting in my week 1 team. And that's just like not something that you should do when your first 2 wide receivers are also Brandon Cooks in a new home and Keenan Allen coming off a season-ending injury. So I still don't hate this team fully, but based on that, the Ezekiel Elliott suspension would definitely matter a lot to me if this were a real team.
That's very fair. I actually didn't even realize that when I was looking through your team. So yeah, that's very interesting, and you're right. So I guess keep that in mind if you're drafting Elliott or Doug Martin for that matter. So moving on to the next question we had here, you drafted OJ Howard late. Are you comfortable rolling into the season with a rookie tight end week 1?
Not really overall, but as you know, I hate the tight end position anyway. I completely don't even wish it was in fantasy football anymore. I'm sure I'm might already on that, but everyone should just be a receiver. But no, what it is that, like, one, I wanted to do it to be a bit of an asshole to Shrek because he took Cameron Brate the pick before. So I just wanted to be like, oh, screw you, OJ Howard. But for me, when you get to this part of the tight end pool, which is a little bit deeper than past years when we've played roulette, it's, again, the Let's Talk Fantasy Football tight end roulette, where it's like guys like Eric Ebron, Cameron Brate are going. OJ Howard has the potential upside, and I'm just as fine rolling him out week 1 and seeing what happens, in the first 2 weeks than if, any other tight end that's going in that value at that value. You know what I mean? Because it's also something you can fix again. I mean, my thought process would be OJ Howard doesn't score a touchdown in the first 2 weeks, and I drop him for, anybody. There's 20 tight ends. So,
yeah, no, I think that's pretty fair. Definitely the best reason to make a pick is to be an asshole to the person who picked before you.
Yeah, 100%. It's gotten me very far.
Making picks out of spite.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next question that I had here was just about going 2 QBs late, because I believe in this mock you were the only team that actually took 2 quarterbacks. So explain.
Actually, both of my teams were.
Yes, and I know that's common in some leagues. It really depends on your specific league. What your league mates value and whatnot. But explain to me the idea behind in the 10th and then the 11th very next pick going Dak Prescott and then Marcus Mariota.
Right. So part of this was that, people could say that this was a little early to take Dak Prescott in the 10th, and I definitely don't disagree. Part of it is the fact that this was a strategy that I really wanted to implement with this team. And going, the picks before that, I went 9 straight flex picks. So it felt like it was okay to reach a little bit. The reason why I went Dak and Mariota, and those were actually 2 guys that I was specifically targeting to package together, I'm trying to sort of, I think it's a strategy I might use a lot going into leagues this year, where I'm hoping that one of them hit. And Dak Prescott came in, obviously everybody in the football world knows he was a rookie, and he was like the 6th quarterback overall last year. Will he necessarily repeat that? I don't know. And Mariota, until the last few weeks, was a top 5 quarterback in his own right, and was sort of having a career year. Now, again, that offense got better. He's got more targets with Corey Davis and Eric Decker coming into the fold now. And pretty much part of it is that I just hope that one of them ascends to that, top 6 or 7 every week starter role, in which case I can see what happens with the other one. But I think it was more just compliment. Like I felt like their upside went well together. And at the very worst, I think that they could be a great pairing for matchup play going week to week.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I like that strategy a lot. It's one that I tend to employ a decent amount myself.
Yeah, they both run, which kind of made me feel good about it too. The fact that they're both mobile quarterbacks that can get you rushing touchdowns as well. So it's sort of I feel like it was a good feel for young risk. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So I didn't have any other questions there, but did you have any other general thoughts that you wanted to bring out there about this team?
Yeah, only other thing I really wanted to say was I took Quincy Enunwa, not necessarily too early, but in the 8th round as my 4th receiver, and I really, really liked that because I think this will be an interesting year for Enunwa, being essentially like the only weapon the Jets have through the air, and he likely will have Josh McCown throwing to him, which isn't like the worst situation you could be in. So he could get a huge, huge target share, I think, this year, and you know, we saw him have decent success last year when in certain games when he was with Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, and like even Robbie Anderson and stuff like that. So I think he's a bit of an intriguing play to draft as like your 4th or 5th wide receiver, depending on how your draft is turning out. Sorry, Walsh, I think we may have lost you there for a minute.
I was on mute. My bad.
Oh, cool. There you go.
All right, cool. Yeah, I like the Enunwa pick as well. I very much like Eric Decker there in the 6th round as well. So let's move on to Shrek's first team. Yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, I'll run it through. So as we said, Shrek went Antonio and Dez at pick 4, which is a pretty good combo of receivers. Went back to wide receiver with Demaryius Thomas in the 3rd. Then needed obviously to take running back, and I like what he did here. He went Spencer Ware and Carlos Hyde. Dante Moncrief, good value in the 6th. Jonathan Stewart, who we'll talk about, I'm sure, in depth in a minute. Corey Coleman of the Browns. James White to Kevin White, and then waited on quarterback until the 11th, where he took Jameis Winston and the aforementioned Cameron Brate after that. So he rounded it off at the end with picks 13, 14, Kenyon Drake and Rex Burkhead, and then took a defense in the 15th round. I think this is a pretty good team. I really like what he did with the running backs after going 3 straight wide receivers in Brown, Bryan, and D. Thomas. Getting Ware and Hyde there, I think, is I don't even know if he thought that would go that well for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he put together a really, really good team. I don't know if part of it was Hyde slipping a little bit, and you know, one of those questions is regarding that. But in general, I think he put together a great team here. Very heavy on the wide receivers, and then with enough running back depth and upside to really kind of piece it all together. I don't get Cameron Brate as a pick, but whatever. All right.
So we'll go into some of the questions that you posted. I know, Walsh, you said here, are you confident drafting 3 straight wide receivers, Shrek, or did Carlos Hyde falling kind of save the strategy for you? I assume you mean going forward as a general strategy. And I wonder what the answer is for that, because that's interesting. Shrek says, looking back at the strategy and how it turned out, I'm okay with it. Not incredibly pumped, but okay. Would most accurately describe it. I wanted a running back in round 3, but really didn't believe in anyone that was coming around to me, so I went wide receiver to load my flex for PPR. I think my wide receivers will be great, but not so happy with the running backs. So he feels a little differently than us, Walsh. Hyde technically saves the strategy for me, but I really hate Hyde. Okay. Was more of a force pick, needing a running back. Him and Spencer Ware could work out. But if they don't, I may be in trouble fast. I think this draft was a classic case of morphing to the draft as it came versus sticking to a set strategy, which I can totally see. I feel like that's uncommon of Shrek to forego the running back position in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. He likes definitely getting at least one running back in there. I think his exact quote when he drafted Carlos Hyde was like, "I fucking hate Carlos Hyde, but I need to take him."
Yeah. And I totally get what he means about morphing to the draft, too. I feel like it's a big year for that. It kind of feels like a Civil War battle where, like, at first you all just march up and it's like the first round and you're just like, all right, let's just kind of shoot at each other. And then by the 3rd round, it just turns into those, like, battlefield melees where everyone's just, like, dying and falling on top of each other and you don't know what's coming at you. And Shrek morphed to it well. I have dark thoughts about fantasy this year, Walt.
It's a pretty serious analogy, but I like it. It seems apt.
Yeah. So let's get back into questions and not my nightmares. So we said we talked about this during the draft, but how long into the season do you think Ware remains a viable starter? Which is a very good question, Walsh. Whereas Shrek said, I think Ware is the guy through, say, week 6 or so at this point. I think he eventually loses the job to Hunt. See the love for Hunt in the Kansas City media and the fact that Ware broke down late last year, which I've read some articles about that as well. He says, this is more of a wild guess on my end, but I believe you can confidently draft Ware for the early part of the season. I also know that Shrek kind of talked about loosely a little bit that he would look to make Spencer Ware as trade bait. And again, Shrek being the resident Chiefs fan would be, at least our best source on how that could play out.
Yeah, that seems like an interesting strategy for a lot of these guys where there are other people waiting in the wings. So, Spencer Ware is a great example of that. Carlos Hyde even could be an example of that, depending on Joe Williams. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense to load up on those guys. And then try and flip them as you go to maybe league mates who are paying slightly less attention than you are.
Right. And I personally think Shrek did really, really well getting Carlos Hyde and Spencer Ware if being nervous with the first 3 wide receivers. So
yeah, and then following that up with Stewart as well, just A+.
Right. So then another question we had here, and I know you wanted to ask this. What made you go Cameron Brate over O.J. Howard? Did you choose Brate because you drafted Winston, or was he your top tight end on the board there? And Shrek goes on to say, Cameron Brate over Howard was 2 things for me. One, Howard is a rookie, and they typically don't produce great in year 1 at the tight end position. Secondly, I've liked the things I've heard about his connection in Tampa Bay with Jameis Winston, which leads me to taking him because I drafted Winston. So I felt like it was late enough in the draft that tight end was pretty much the same all around, so I went for the possible stack. Again, Shrek drafted Cameron Brate in the 12th round, so he's pretty much right on that front there. Walsh, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
All right, cool. So moving on here, we said, were you specifically targeting Coleman and White? And when we say Coleman and White, I'm sorry, we mean Corey Coleman and James White, I assume, right? Is that what you were asking? Or Kevin White? I believe you meant Kevin White.
Oh, yeah, I meant Kevin White there.
Yeah, so were you specifically targeting Corey Coleman and Kevin White, or did they just fall to you at the right spot? Shrek says, both were more about how the draft fell to me. Coleman, I thought, was just a good place for him to go, and that was, I believe, round 8, which I kind of agree with, yeah. And then he said, White, I was surprised his ADP was even lower than where I took him. At the ADP I paid, he's worth the gamble, especially with the starting wide receivers I have. And again, Kevin White, I believe, was 2 rounds later in the 10th. Yes. So I kind of agree with Shrek there. Walsh, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. It's I was more curious whether those are guys he's high on, but doesn't really seem like it.
Right. Okay. So then the last question we had for Shrek's team here was, are you worried about Carlos Hyde, Spencer Ware, and Jonathan Stewart, his top 3 running backs, all potentially losing their jobs as the season unfolds? What would be your plan if they all saw decreased roles earlier in the season than anticipated? And Shrek said, terrified on all 3 counts. Fair. And you got to love Shrek and his honesty. He said, Hyde, I'm worried that he gets hurt and then loses the job early on. Spencer Ware, I think I try and sell high on at some point in the season, assuming he starts well. So that's his plan there. We kind of just talked about that. And he said, Jonathan Stewart, I think will be okay enough to roll with. He needs the touchdowns, but I think they gave him a bunch of money for a reason, which is a good point. He's never a sexy pick. Jonathan Stewart is never a sexy pick. You're right, Shrek. But I think his ADP this offseason is criminal. If all 3 shit the bed on me, I'd be screwed and likely be playing the wire from last place. Otherwise, I need to sell off one of my top wide receivers to try and balance out my team. Not an ideal strategy, but the best answer I have at this point in the offseason. I think Shrek covered that pretty perfectly. Of those 3, Walsh, who do you think would be the most valuable in Week 10? Of Spencer Ware, Carlos Hyde, and Jonathan Stewart, who do you think is the best running back to roll with come Week 10? If you had to make a guess.
That's a really hard question. I
don't even know what I would say.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Stewart because maybe not though. Ah, fuck, man, that's hard. You know what? I like Spencer Ware. I think he's good. I know the Kansas City media is down on him. I'm going to go with Spencer Ware. I don't think he loses that job.
I agree with you completely. And also, I don't know anything about what the Christian McCaffrey plans are going to be, but the fact that, the ADPs are, kind of pointless to necessarily, swear by so early, but he's going so much earlier than Jonathan Stewart, and I wonder if there's a reason. I don't know. I agree, though, Spencer Ware.
Yeah.
All right, so you got any more on Shrek's team, or I'll read through yours real quick and ask you some questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'll double up. So Walsh, as we said, the first round went Julio Jones, Doug Baldwin, really nice stack there. And then he followed up with third wide receiver in the third round in Michael Crabtree. Round 4 took Travis Kelce. I have a couple questions about that we'll get to in a minute. And at this point had 0 running backs until in round 5 and 6 when he took Bilal Powell and Amir Abdullah, which we will also talk about. Kelvin Benjamin in the 7th. I like that. Jamal Charles, Matt Forte, Kareem Hunt, and Joe Williams. A nice little 4-round run on running backs there. Late round wide receivers was Will Fuller. And then you took Tyrod in the 13th, which we will. I have a couple questions about that as well. Rounded it off with Chris Conley and the Minnesota defense in the 15th round. So the first question I had for you, I said, Walsh, a common strategy for you in past drafts and all the time is to wait on any running back and then make a mid-round run. Do you think your depth here is quality enough?
I do. I think my depth there is fine to start the season. I would expect at least one of those guys to hit in some sort of way. And then I think one of the underreported or, not really spoken about keys to the strategy involving, taking a lot of mid-round running backs is that by week 6, my running backs are going to look completely different. So part of that strategy is knowing that you're going to be working the waiver wire really hard for running backs. So at this point, I'm fine starting the season, and I'm fine going into it knowing that I'm going to have to put in a lot of effort on that waiver wire.
That's true. The only qualm that I would have, and it's nitpicking again, is that 2 of these guys are Jets. So that's, just generally and then also, it's just that could just be hard for you, I think, going forward, trying to choose which one if Abdullah and Charles were to both not work out. I would almost think your best case scenario there is an injury to one of them.
Right. And that was like a really fucking terrible realization of just I just monopolized the Jets running back core in the 9th round of a draft, which is just why am I doing that to myself? But yeah, an injury to one of them, honestly, for, we don't root for injuries by any means, but
no.
An injury to one of them would fantasy wise be the best case scenario for me. I very much like Powell, though, as a guy who, will catch 5 passes a game or whatever.
I do too. And then part 2 follow-up to that question, since you waited till the 5th round for running back, I said you took Travis Kelce in the 4th, so you obviously still believe in him. Does that pick say more about your love for Travis Kelce or hate for the running back value that was compared to the next round? And just for some context, again, that was Spencer Ware and Doug Martin went right after that, and then Christian McCaffrey, Carlos Hyde until you're Bilal Powell. So did you feel that no real running back sort of fit there, or was Kelce in the 4th a steadfast strategy for you?
So I didn't love the running back depth, but I also do very much like Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is the broke back mount, the I just can't quit you type of thing for me. But he I'm higher on him than Jordan Reed, certainly, who went before him. For the fact that who the fuck else are they going to throw to? Tyreek Hill, yeah, sure. And then, they have Chris Conley and a host of other wide receivers, Albert Wilson and a couple rookies whose names I can't remember right now. They have to throw to Travis. He has to lead the NFL in tight end targets this year. I don't see any other way around that.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree. I personally just get so scared of investing in a tight end that high that it blows my mind that you have the giant-sized balls to do it. But I just cannot. But, we can talk about that up on the mountain.
My giant ball.
I'm broke back. We'll talk about it. But moving on from that, unless you had anything more on that.
No, I'm cool.
Yeah, all right. Whether it's Brokeback Mountain or Travis Kelce, but either one, I'll talk about. But I already asked you the Doug Baldwin question compared to Lamar and Dez, so I'll skip over that. And the last one I had for you, because I thought this team was really good actually. Those three wide receivers, and I know you like them too. Crabtree in the 3rd was really nice. But one potential, snag, though it's not really, was are you comfortable enough with Tyrod not having a backup because you're all in on Tyrod, or do you just think that the waivers would would provide, a suitable option for you if he were to, anything were to happen. He would fall off or, get injured, God forbid, or something like that. So,
yeah, I'm just cool with working the waivers. I mean, in this draft, like Andy Dalton, I'm very high on Andy Dalton this year. I'm like super high on the Bengals for some reason. But Andy Dalton's still available. Like Eli Manning's still available. I think he'll be fine this year. There's plenty of guys on the waivers who like I'm totally cool with picking up for a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I kind of figured that was the case, but just kind of wanted to see if you were still loving on some Tyrod.
I do still love Tyrod. I think he's going to have a very good year. And on my other team, I took Sammy Watkins, but for that reason. But anyway, that's
cool.
That's for later.
All right. On the last question, what was your thought process on Minnesota D in the 15th? I'm completely kidding. Don't even waste time. It was a joke. I just know you hate that with defenses at all. So I figured I would make you go on to Vinny's team. We can do defense another day.
All right, cool. We're gonna go on to Vinny's team. This is the last of the team ones, I guess, or the first teams for everyone. So Vinny went. He started with LaShawn McCoy and T.Y. Hilton, as we said. Followed that up with Isaiah Crowell, Tom Brady in the 4th, then LeGarrette Blount, Emmanuel Sanders, Frank Gore. Vinny always has Frank Gore for some stupid reason. Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Matthews, Jaquiz Rogers, Mike Williams, Taylor Gabriel, Eric Ebron, and Chris Hogan, and then the Giants D. So Vinny did some interesting things there. Brady in the 4th was pretty interesting. He took Blunt a bit earlier than I think any of us expected, but that's fine, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing. So I'll get into some of these questions here that we asked Vinny, and I think Vinny was kind of drunk when he wrote these answers, so that will probably play into them. All right, first question here: are you happy with the team construction after going early quarterback? And Vinny said, honestly, I'm never happy when I go QB early, but I was pleased with my first 4 guys and got cocky with the Brady pick. If I could go back, I'd much rather grab another skill position player and grab a Kirk or Rivers or Ty fucking God. Yeah, I mean, Brady in the 4th is like fine, but it's just I can't see myself ever getting away from late round quarterback. Anyway, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but to your point, there's just the value difference from 10 rounds later is just so small, I think, compared to where you're drafting them, that it just isn't worth it. But I think he did a really good job navigating around it. LaShawn McCoy obviously in the 1st, great, but I liked Isaiah Crowell in the 3rd round. You were talking before about running back success translating to the, success of their O-line. And the Browns are expected to have one of the best O-lines in all football this year, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm kind of high on Crowell. And I just think that he got some solid flex players around Brady. And then another good thing was waited a long time on tight end, which is almost a must when you take a quarterback that early, I think personally, unless it's, Gronk. But
right. Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm also with you on the Crowell love. I think I would take him ahead of Marshawn Lynch, who went roughly 7 picks earlier. But yeah, on to the next question here, if I can pull it up, which I can. All right, cool. Any worry about start-sit decisions with the mostly big play-oriented wide receiver core? And just for a refresher, that wide receiver core was T.Y. Hilton, Emmanuel Sanders, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Matthews, Mike Williams, Taylor Gabriel, Chris Hogan. So a lot of guys who rely on deep targets, big plays, that sort of thing. And Vinny's answer there was a tad bit scared, but I think T.Y. and Sanders can be my rocks every week, and then choose between some game breakers I have or playing J-Matt with some stable floor. I am imagining because I'm a sad person. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. And like, those are the type of decisions that just make you go fucking nuts because like you sit Deshaun Jackson and then he gets like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then you play him and then he gets like a catch and fucking for 30 yards.
See, one thing I was going to say about this team that I don't even know if Vinny realized since he was drunk while drafting it potentially is that I kind of like that in the format he would actually be able to use if he wanted week one. So he's got T.Y. and Sanders and his two running backs that are obviously going in. But your next flex options would be Blunt, who's a bit of a mystery. Gore, you don't feel great about, and you're saying Deshaun Jackson. What if you throw Jacquizz Rodgers in there during the Doug Martin suspension in the flex and let the other question marks sort of pan out and reveal the tone of their season? Because I think that could be like a perfect situation to see how Blunt's role falls, what Deshaun Jackson does, and Jordan Matthews, because all those teams are going through changes. So and Jacquizz Rodgers, I believe, plays Miami week 1, and then the Bears week 2. So, those are two good matchups going into, trying to figure out that team.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And that's probably something that, had this been a real team that Vinny would have, ended up realizing at some point and done.
Right.
So it's definitely a very good point there. The third question that we had, do you view Ebron as a viable starter? And are you happy that you waited on tight ends? And Vinny says, I love Ebron with like 6 O's. I'm definitely glad that he waited on tight end hard. So yeah, I also love Ebron generally. I've been an Ebron supporter for a little while. And I think he did a very good job, as you said, because he went early with Brady. He waited on tight end and he was able to get a guy who, he can probably start and will probably do just fine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Next question here. You took Blunt over his ADP, so a little bit earlier than his ADP. Is he someone that you're targeting specifically? And what Vinny said is, yeah, I targeted Blunt hard. He won't come close to his production from last year, but this causes people to overlook the fact that the Eagles ran inside the 5 a ton and Ryan Matthews had 8 touchdowns. So I'm thinking Blunt has some hefty goal line work lined up. LeGarrette Blount. Blount's like potentially the worst last name that's ever happened. But that's actually a very good point. I'm not actively targeting Blunt this year. What do you think about that?
Which point that Vinny made? I'm sorry, I was caught up in the Blanc.
That the Eagles ran a lot inside the 5, and Ryan Matthews had 8 touchdowns. So
yeah, and I mean Ryan Matthews is likely to be released any day now, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're waiting for a past physical on him, and then the only competition really is just Wendell Smallwood again, and Darren Sproles. Who the hell are you going to give the ball to at the goal line, dude?
Yeah, no, that it would make all the sense in the world for Blunt to kind of be the dude there.
I wish nothing but Alshon Jeffrey fades on Vinny's ass.
Just lots of Alshon. All right, so the last question here. Would you anticipate using mostly wide receiver or running back at flex with this lineup? And, you kind of made that point earlier about the first couple of weeks being able to use Jacquizz Rodgers, but Vinny said definitely wide receiver. Plugging in a weak winner home run hitter is what this shit team will live and die on every week. So Vinny being pretty honest about his prospects and his team. What do you think there?
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. I mean, depending on how the team shakes out, apart from the Jacquizz Rodgers situation, you got to just hope that a guy. I mean, Jordan Matthews could come around as a better possession receiver out of the slot now with Alshon there, and he could have some more serviceable games. And you would just have to see, but definitely a home run hitting strategy is not the worst with that shit team, Vinny.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and there's something to be said for consistency. There's also something to be said for just being able to put up a fuckload of points in any given week. So, it's a little bit of give and take. So that was Vinny's team. We'll get into the second round of teams. This is going pretty serious. But whatever, we'll do a long podcast. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, whether we could, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. What we're going to do right now, though, is take a quick break to hear about Vupiq.
This year, dominate your friends with free play-by-play fantasy football from Vupiq. Vupiq is the first play-by-play fantasy football game where you can crush your friends from the comfort of your own couch. For the first time in fantasy football, you must think like the players and coaches on the field as you predict the outcome of every play. Sign up now for an invitation to beta test Vupiq. Free play-by-play fantasy football.
All right, and we're back. Let's get into the second set of teams that we all did. So this is picks 7 through 12. We're going to start with Ed, pick seventh, sorry, not second. That's not in the range of 7 through 12. We asked Ed 5 questions, and he only answered one of them for some reason. So we're going to have to kick Ed's ass. But anyway, Ed's team here that he went with, we started, and this is a very interesting team.
I was going to say, this is the most interesting team of this mock draft, I think.
Yeah, it would have been really nice to get like more insight into this if he had answered all 5 of our fucking questions. But anyway, Ed went Odell Beckham, Rob Gronkowski, then followed that up with Aaron Rodgers, Leonard Fournette, Mike Gillislee, Stephon Diggs, Paul Perkins, Devontae Parker, Marvin Jones, Rob Kelly and Duke Johnson, and then Brashad Perryman and Zay Jones, Houston defense, and Dan Bailey. What the fuck's up with Dan Bailey? No. So the first question that we asked Ed, and the only one that he answered, it was more of just a statement, but talk about the mindset behind going both early tight end and early QB. We just talked about with Vinny's team how he went early QB and late tight end, and we liked that. Ed took tight end and quarterback in the second and third round, first off the board for each of them. So his answer here, this is the best value Gronk has been in years. I agree. If he stays healthy, he's a league changer. Rodgers is always quarterback 5 or better with Jordy healthy. I figured grabbing them early allowed me to spend rounds 4 through 13, on building my roster without worrying about those positions. I think that's fair. I don't think I would do it, but I think it's fair. What are your thoughts there?
I definitely agree with his thoughts on it, but we'll talk about this since Ed didn't answer the questions. It's nothing personal to Ed, but I just think that he almost ruined it with the running back choices that he had, because Odell, Gronk, and Rodgers is enough to potentially win you a league with very average production at other positions, right? Would you agree? Those are your heavy hitters. So in the 4th round, going Leonard Fournette, a complete question mark in a crowded Jacksonville backfield, and then following it up with Mike Gillislee. Right after Fournette went guys like Spencer Ware and Doug Martin and Carlos Hyde. And I think if you get Spencer Ware or one of those guys, that's like a definite 8-point average per week. And that's enough right there. Fournette could be a complete bust. And then you followed it up with Mike Gillislee, who is in a crowded Patriots backfield, and again is a huge question mark. So I would have ideally, and again, you can't really say in the draft where you're going to go, but ideally with that risk at the running back position, I would have loved to see him go like Spencer Ware and Theo Riddick, or like LeGarrette Blount and Danny Woodhead, something that's a little more concrete that you can hopefully count on going forward than 2 just complete dice rolls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fairness, Fournette was way behind his ADP. I think his ADP is way too high.
Fuck Fournette's ADP.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's interesting because you're right. He did take some serious risks. I do like the Paul Perkins pick. And I think Perkins has the chance to really be a rock for him with in that situation. I mean, the only real competition he has there is Shane Vereen. And they've talked him up as a guy who they think can be a 3-down back. What are your thoughts there with Paul Perkins going in the 7th?
I don't hate it. I would prefer to not stack it with Odell just because I don't know how widespread the Giants offense can be week to week with that. Though I guess Odell is kind of, immune to that. But I definitely don't hate it. I would have probably rather gone Latavius Murray or someone that went kind of after. But that's definitely – I think that's the best running back pick of the 3 of them, especially for value. And I would be more willing to start Perkins week 1 than I would Fournette or maybe even Gillislee.
I think part of it too is depending on how the preseason plays out. You might be able to start Rob Kelly for the first couple of weeks before Samaje Perine takes his. Or it's Perine? I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard both.
All right, I don't care. Before he takes his job,
you just call him Sanjay Blanc. That's it.
Sanjay Blanc. Jeez.
Wait, no, just Blanc. I love that name, Blanc. Someone's got to be Blanc.
Yeah, someone does have to be Blanc. I feel like that's something we can figure out over time.
Yeah, you're right.
That would be a great fullback name. Just Blanc.
Samaje. How do you pronounce the first name? Is it Samaje?
Samaje.
Samaje. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I was.
No, you're good. Oh, we'll figure out how to pronounce his last name at some point, but now is not that time. Yeah, I mean, there are things you can do with that back or with that core of running backs, but it's definitely a little weird. It's definitely one that's not particularly good. What do you think about his wide receivers? Do you think he did well enough to support Odell there? Because you probably want to go wide receiver in the flex with that running back core, right?
Right. It'd be shocking if 3 of those running backs were startable every single week, especially early on. Mm-hmm. So I guess so. Yeah, I think he did okay because you got to hope that Devontae Parker or Marvin Jones is going to come around, into their role, I guess. And Stephon Diggs is definitely worth, a flex play, you would assume, going forward. So I don't think it's too bad. And you got to keep in mind, again, whenever you look at that you got Gronk. Like, that changes everything.
Right. It definitely does. So, it's you need less from your other positions, basically, because of Gronk there. You got anything else on its team?
No, not really. I just, I think he didn't need to go as high ceiling, low floor with the running backs early on. I would have just gone for a little more, something that you could count on a little more consistently in the single digits. That's my only lasting thought.
Fair enough. I think that's a very, very good point. All right, go through Don's stuff, dude.
Yeah, I'll take Don's team here. Let me just switch over. So Don, this was pick 8 overall, his second team. As we said before, he went Melvin Gordon, Jay Ajayi, very nice. Then did a 4-round run on wide receivers. Went Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Brandon Marshall, Jamison Crowder. I think very well done there. Andrew Luck in the 7th. Dalvin Cook, Tyrell Williams, followed up by Hunter Henry in the 10th as his tight end. Cole Beasley, Darren Sproles, and then to be the biggest piece of shit in the world, went Justin Tucker in the 13 when most of us didn't draft kickers, defense, and then took Josh Gordon in the 15th. So if Don wasn't already the most hated by me on this podcast, he has definitely descended to it now, I guess. Say. So many questions. So many existential questions and just really heartfelt things that I want to say here, but we'll just stick with the questions we have posted. You asked Don, how pumped are you on Gordon and Ajayi combo? And I assume you don't mean Josh Gordon, but Melvin Gordon.
Yes, that is correct.
Because that's what normal people say. Don said, definitely more pumped about it than Vinny is. Obviously, I'm cooler with Ajayi this year than most of the podcast. Between the two of them, I feel like I definitely have the most, in quotes, overrated running back duo. But if they even hit realistic expectations, it's a solid core that I'm cool with. Walsh?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a throwaway question on my part. I didn't do very well on that. My bad.
Yeah, but it's worth talking about, though. I mean, you want to get his thought process. And he's right. I mean, they're both kind of risky running backs coming off what could be the best year of each of their respective careers. But,
yeah.
If one of them, like he said, if they even come close and, if both of those guys with the rest of his team, if they finish in running backs, 7 and 14, he could still be fine, So then your next question was, did that running back combo give you the comfort to kind of punt the position from there on out, or do you wish you invested more in running backs later in the draft? Great passive-aggressive question, Walsh. I love it. So just for some context, again, Don drafted Gordon Ajayi. It was such a cocky bastard that he waited until the 8th round to draft Dalvin Cook and then just took Darren Sproles in the 12th and fucking didn't care anymore after that, I guess. So Don's answer was, it made me feel okay, but I always like to have more backup than what I got on this team. Yeah, so does everybody else in fantasy football, Don. But I was strictly going value for rounds later and didn't want to reach on running backs that I didn't feel deserved to be picked there. Yeah, well, if you do that, you may have a 0 running back team, by the way. But he said, major dice rolling, but sticking to my guns with these two guys, hoping they pan out. Okay, so, I mean, I don't really think that's a great excuse for only backing up those guys with Dalvin Cook and Darren Sproles, but what are your thoughts there, Walsh?
Yeah, I don't think he did a good job past those two in the running back department.
Yeah.
Particularly, I'm very low on Dalvin Cook in general, but I mean, with that wide receiver core, he's never going to need to start a running back in his flex. There's ways that he can kind of work around it, but like one injury potentially fucks him like pretty hard.
Oh yeah, big time. And you're stuck with 3 running backs then, and one of them's Darren Sproles. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously you can work the waiver wire, but it's a scary situation.
Yeah, to your point, I would be thinking maybe Don knows something that we don't know about Dalvin Cook. So perfect timing, asked him, were you specifically targeting Dalvin Cook, or was the value just right? And Don says, absolutely not targeting Dalvin Cook. So all hope is lost. He said, in recent podcasts, Vinny Schreck and I are down on him, but eventually I really did need a running back badly. Yes, you did. And with him falling 3 rounds farther than his actual ADP, I grabbed him in the sense that if he actually does live up to the hype, then it will work out nicely. And his upside was much higher than any other running back at that point. So, okay, yeah, I don't know. Walsh.
So here's my thing with Dalvin Cook. I know he is a great he produced very prolifically in college, very, very good running back. He can't pass block. And the biggest thing that keeps rookie running backs off, like talented rookie running backs off the field, is not being able to pass block. So I don't think you can trust him at all to be on a team that just gave Latavius Murray a decent amount of money and actually be out there this year. I think Dalvin Cook will have a good career. But I don't think this year will be the year for him because of that.
Yeah, I've also read some articles that Jerome McKinnon is still not out of the fold yet, and that they still kind of expect him to get some sort of workload. Whatever the distribution is, I don't know, but it's just I would never want that as my third running back on my team ever.
No, not at all.
I think that's the lasting message here. So then last question we had for Don, do you believe Tyrell Williams will keep his starting job with the Chargers drafting Mike Williams? Don says, good question, Walsh. I actually didn't think that much into this pick. I'm sorry. This is my first time reading these answers. I don't know if you could tell by the flow. Oh, God. All right. Start over. I actually did not think that much into this pick, which is a good lesson for myself and the listeners. I love it. But Williams, not specifying which one, is a big body receiver with some upside for the fact that Phillip can sling and likes having that big bodied guy. Also, Williams may have a slow start to this season. I think Mike Williams, sorry. Yeah. Also, Mike Williams may have a slow start to this season with his back injury, so at least wide receiver 2 should be locked in for a while before they see anything with Mike Williams. Okay, that's fair. I think what he means there is, he expects them to phase Mike Williams in more than just, totally assume that he's their number 2 receiver off the bat, which I don't necessarily disagree with. Everything else he said I disagree with in some sort of way. But
I agree with him completely that I don't think Tyrell is going to get phased out really, particularly to start the season. Like, he was great last year. He's a huge dude. He runs like a gazelle. There's reason to be afraid of Mike Williams because he's a very, very talented guy. I see him being the type of guy who's used in the red zone early in the season and gradually sees his snap percentage go up throughout the year.
Yeah, okay, I'm down with that. Anything else you got on Don's team here? I mean, Andrew Luck in the 7th wasn't too bad. I mean, he was the 4th quarterback taken, but I think that's like, an all right time to pull the trigger if you're going to do it there, right? It's not like outrageous.
Yeah, I think it's fine. He's very, very heavy on the Chargers, which is weird. And then I would like to say I think his first 6 rounds were spectacular.
Yeah, I agree.
Melvin Gordon, Jay Ajayi, and then when Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Brandon Marshall, Jamison Crowder, and like those almost could have been any of those receivers in that range. I just think loading up on 4 guys like in that range like that was a very, very well done. Very, very well done strategy. He just needed to follow it up a little bit better with his running backs.
Yeah, I think those 4 receivers where he took them were great, especially Jamison Crowder early on in the 6th, which I think we all think he might have a pretty big breakout year here, possibly.
Yeah.
So, I like Don's first 7 picks for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Let's move on here. Walsh, you want to read my team, dude? Read my team.
All right, Rodgers' number 2 team. Started off Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, as we discussed. From there, just burped. From there, he went Ty Montgomery, Alshon Jeffrey, Danny Woodhead, Eddie Lacy, John Brown, Martellus Bennett, Derek Carr, Jeremy Hill, Sterling Shepard, Kirk Cousins, Kenny Stills, Chris Thompson, and the Titans defense. I didn't write down any questions for you because I think I got lazy and figured I would just wing it. So here we go.
I'm so excited.
I think your running back core is interesting.
Yes.
What would you anticipate like being your desired outcomes for each of those guys? And how do you project Lacy and Woodhead with their new teams?
Okay, so I'll say on this team here, with Lacy, I think Lacy you'll know early on. So I kind of took him because he could be a goal line back for Seattle, and it's a great offense. He's lost some weight, as I'm sure we'll tell you like many times, and everyone else will tell you many, many times throughout the season. It was just Ty Montgomery I didn't really love there, and I really wanted to go running back. And, the guys that were there were like, the Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, Spencer Ware, and Doug Martin. Like, for this particular team, I didn't really like it. I definitely didn't want to take Doug Martin already having Mike Evans. So I kind of went Ty Montgomery, a little bit of a homer pick, but he's the only guy in the Packers backfield that has ever got a carry in the NFL. So you would hope that, with his pass catching abilities, that he will continue to get fed. Danny Woodhead, I know that Ravens backfield is clustered and he's coming off, a torn, was it an ACL or a patellar tendon or
I don't remember.
I don't exactly remember, but he's always pretty good in PPR, something to fall back on. I hope they use him in the red zone, like teams in the past had, like the Chargers. But it was more just me sort of trying to hit there with like a veteran running backs, I guess, other than Ty Montgomery that could sort of be serviceable. I think what kind of saved me was getting Jeremy Hill in the 10th. That felt really good. I wouldn't feel nearly as good about it if I didn't have that insurance on the back end too. So that kind of helps. But yeah, it was more just me trying to muddle through this entire thing.
That's fair. And for muddling, I think you came out pretty well there. It's interesting because the range of outcomes for those guys are pretty much all of those guys are huge. But yeah, I mean, you would think at least some of them would, reach those.
Right.
So Martellus Bennett, you took him as, what is this? The 7th tight end off the board? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 8th one. Was that you're specifically targeting him? Was it a homer pick? Where were you going here?
I'm specifically targeting him maybe like 2 rounds later. But what happened was when I knew that I was going to wait on my other team, and you were talking about differing strategies, I knew I was going to wait for tight end there. And there was kind of an early run on tight ends. I mean, we just said there were 7 drafted in the first 7 rounds. So I kind of didn't want to end up with like a Hunter Henry, Eric Ebron tier. And Martellus Bennett's a guy that I think is really, really interesting. I mean, he's an extremely skilled tight end. We saw him have – motorcycle driving by. We saw him have some success with the Patriots, and we saw Jared Cook have some sex. Oh man, dude, we're got preseason jitters, man. Cook have some sex. Podcast. It's 85 degrees in my apartment right now. I haven't gotten up in so long time. we saw Jared Cook have some success. And I wanted Martellus Bennett, and I wanted a tight end that I felt good about. That's the bottom line.
That was awesome. All right. And then I guess looking at the later round receivers, were those guys just kind of like they fell to you, or are you like specifically looking at Shepard and Stills? And I guess John Brown as well too. That's a pick I don't know what I think of him this year.
Yeah. I didn't really love the John Brown pick. I kind of just did it. I'm going to pull a Don there and just be like, I didn't think much about this at all. And, I just still think he's waiting for a breakout situation as well. And I doubt it's going to come this year, but it just felt right. I didn't really like any of the receivers that were going around that area anyway. And it's like, screw it. But Sterling Shepard, I actually kind of liked it as the in the 11th round, and Kenny Stills was sort of just a late round. Like, there's starting to be guys that I don't know how to pronounce their names anymore.
Right. I mean, Zay Jones was taking 2 picks earlier.
Right.
You're just kind of going through there.
But sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say one more question you may or may not have had was I went with a 2 quarterback strategy, completely different here as well. On the last team when I talked about Dak Prescott and Mariota, this one in round 9, I went Derek Carr and then took Kirk Cousins in round 12. Part of the thought process here was I wasn't initially anticipating going 2 quarterbacks on this team, but as they started to go and it got down to round 9, Derek Carr is obviously again coming off the injury, but he was a clear-cut quarterback 1 last year, maybe like top 6 option overall. So I really liked the value there. And I was going to kind of stick with that, but still with some, trepidations about him coming off the big injury and everything like that, if what the rust situation would be sort of going forward. So then it was more just, when guys like Dak and Mariota, who even though I picked them, but like Jameis Winston and guys like that started going, Cam and everything, I was like, you know what, Kirk Cousins could still have some value. And if this were an actual league, I would look at a lot of teams that were not taking 2 quarterbacks and think a week 1 injury to somebody has them either needing a quarterback from somebody or going to the Andy Daltons of the world on the waiver wire. So it could be an interesting thing to even trade Carr for big money and roll with Cousins all year, So it was kind of just more of an overall value pick rather than drafting the likes of Kenny Stills, who went out a round later or things like that.
Right. That makes sense. I said before, I'm cool with rolling on the waiver wire, but a lot of people aren't, if people have their quarterbacks go down, there's a decent amount of people in leagues out there who aren't going to be cool with just all right, I'm going to go waiver wire quarterbacks for a while. They're going to want that, known quantity or commodity. That's the word I was looking for. Right. So yeah, that's a very good point there with that trade value. Also, it's fair to point out too that Derek Carr has 2 of the best defenses in the NFL in his division. He plays them 4 times a year.
That's a good point.
So it certainly makes sense to keep your options open there.
Yep.
Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with this team?
No, not really. Just definitely wanted to talk about what went behind that quarterback strategy. And otherwise, I just hope Ty Montgomery can live up to 3rd round value because I think that will kind of be his ADP as the season gets closer.
All right. Sounds good. Let's move on to Shrek's team. Take it away.
Yes. All right. Let me see. So Shrek's second team here, pick 10. We said before he went AJ Green, Jordan Howard, then rounded out the receiving core with Terrell Pryor, Jarvis Landry, took AP as his second running back, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. Greg Olsen in the 6th, Latavius Murray, Randall Cobb, took Cam Newton in the 9th, which I thought was interesting, not necessarily bad, but Thomas Rawls, Alan Hearns, Kenneth Dixon, J.J. Nelson, and then with his last pick before defense, Devontae Booker in the 14th. Definitely a pretty good team. You posted some questions for me here, Walsh. Did you want to say anything before we got into those, or should I just read them off?
No, go into the questions, and we'll work from there.
All right, so you said, how comfortable are you with this running back core? And again, Shrek's running back core was Jordan Howard, AP, Latavius Murray, Thomas Rawls, etc. So he says, I love Jordan Howard, and I'm not worried at all. He said, I'm worried about my running back too, Adrian Peterson, I assume, or, whoever he's thinking about plugging in there. But figure I'll have to play the wire wisely to survive depending on AP. one thing I want to say before you comment on this, it is not good to already count on playing the waiver wire for your second running back spot immediately after a draft.
That's fair. That's definitely fair.
Yeah.
Particularly when, he did invest some resources there and it's not ideal.
No, it is not. So then you also asked Walsh why Howard over Ajayi, and he said, I simply believe more in Howard than Ajayi. You can argue for or against either, but I personally think Jay Ajayi was more explosive in just a few games versus Howard, who was a little more consistent, which I don't necessarily disagree with. Howard probably is the more consistent back.
Yeah, I mean, Shrek's clearly higher on Jordan Howard than either you or I. But it's, it is what it is. It's personal preference there. I don't necessarily agree, but that's, he has every right to that.
Cool. I agree with that. So then we asked him, do you view Terrell Pryor as an every week starter now that he's in Washington? Well, Shrek said, yes, I think he's going to be fed a ton of balls. Eloquent. I paid a nice price for him, so hoping he pans out in general, not too worried about him. I kind of agree with that. I think Terrell Pryor has a lot of potential this year. What are your thoughts, Walsh? I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, I mean, Terrell Pryor was great last year for the fucking Browns. And now he's got Kirk Cousins throwing to him. So that's certainly an upgrade, and I like Terrell Pryor a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, this is only like his third year playing wide receiver, so like there's a decent chance he just like got better at the position over the offseason too.
Right, yeah, and I totally think that he could be counted on week to week to be in your top 2 or 3 receivers for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
should
totally.
So then you asked Shrek going into his running back core again, is Latavius Murray a guy you would rely on, or is he potential trade bait if he starts off hot for you with Dalvin Cook potentially looming in the wings? He said, I would not bank on Latavius Murray. He was good in Oakland with that O-line, but won't see the same success in Minnesota, in my opinion. I think he's more trade value there if I need him to be. I saw him as a value pick at that ADP versus Dalvin Cook. So Shrek not loving Latavius Murray. I'm sure he wishes he got something a little more secure with AP being his second, but I still don't really hate that running back core fully.
No, it's interesting. I think he's right that the Minnesota line has been an issue, and I know they did work this offseason to improve it, but it's definitely not the Raiders' offensive line that he's running behind. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
Yes, that's true. And the last question we had for Shrek here was the Cam Greg Olsen stack on purpose or just coincidence? Do you like stacking guys in season-long fantasy? Shrek goes, I regret my Cam pick. You could see how nervous we all were, too, by our explanations here. You just asked me about John Brown and just like, And Shrek's just like, I regret my Cam pick. And then Vinny was just drunk the whole time. But he goes on saying, but once I committed, I figured I might as well try and get some extra value from it. I support stacking guys, but I won't go out of my way to do it. For example, if 2 guys are ranked next to each other, I'll go for the stack. Again, I don't advise people to purposely draft that way, but it can be nice to have as long as you're not too heavily invested in one offense, which I agree with. I think the stack can be beneficial, but it depends on, to me, how the rest of your team is constructed. Like we're talking about Vinny potentially playing home run hitting wide receivers. I think if you're if you're a team that needs home runs hit for you to win some weeks, then it's good to have a stack.
Yeah, absolutely. It can certainly help out. And there's no reason to really shy away from it. But yeah, I'm the same way as Shrek. I'm not like going out like, I need to draft a receiver from this quarterback or whatever, but it certainly doesn't hurt you.
Right. And then, the last thing I would say about Shrek's team is I don't think he's giving himself enough credit for the wide receiver core he rounded out, because that Terrell Pryor was followed by Jarvis Landry, and then you got Randall Cobb and Allen Hurns and a potential breakout in J.J. Nelson. So I feel like he would have a lot of good options there going forward that could potentially offset his running back 2 woes.
Yeah, that's pretty stellar. You pretty much never are going to have to use a running back in the flex with that team. So you're really only worried about your RB2 position.
Right. And you know, that's where you ideally want to just minimize your risk to having to stress about one position and one slot in your lineup week to week. Ideally.
Yeah. And
you know, he's kind of set that up to do that.
That's honestly, that's been my strategy as well. Cause like you're going to have one position that you're going to kind of, you know, need to worry about. RB2, I've seen the most success, I feel like, when that position for me is RB2.
Yes, I agree with that.
I certainly like where Shrek went there.
Because also I've started to realize something that'll hurt me in the past is that if I have to complement with the waivers, whether it be quarterback or running back 2 or flex, you know, and I'm trying to pick guys up week to week to start, I'm usually screwing myself if I don't have a great tight end. Because then you have to prioritize, well, you know, am I going to get my tight end on the waivers this year or this week? Or, you know, you got to get your streamable quarterback. So you want to sort of minimize how many positions you have to do that with. So it's good he had Greg Olsen too.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I really have on that team. You got anything, Walsh? I'll just read. I'll read your team to you as well, and then you can wrap up Vinny's.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So Walsh, let's see, your 11th pick, your second team here. You, as we said, Michael Thomas to Marco Murray, which I personally like. And then very interesting here, you went Joe Mixon in the third round as your running back 2, which we'll talk about. Sammy Watkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Pierre Garcon, Delaney Walker, tight end in the 7th, CJ Procise, Kenny Britt, the name that Samaje Perine is getting closer. The Redskins potential backup. That's what Darren McFadden, Tyler Lockett, waited on Phillip Rivers in the 13th, which I like, the last quarterback taken in the draft, and then DeAndre Washington in the 14th round with your last pick. So first, let me ask you the first question I have for you here. Sorry, Walsh, it's going to take me 1 second to pull it up. Well, we already talked about Michael Thomas. I said, so you stacked a very good wide receiver core here, but are you cool with CJ Procise being the next man up as insurance for Joe Mixon, or do you wish that you had better running back depth here?
Yeah, I probably could have done a better job of you know, getting that running back depth because Mixon is a risk. I think what I did was I took Darren McFadden on purpose for that reason because if Ezekiel Elliott is suspended for a game or two, I don't have to start Joe Mixon week 1.
Good call. I didn't even consider that.
That was kind of the rationale there. And then Procise, I think. You know, particularly in a PPR league, I feel like Procise is going to be a guy who, if the rest of your team is good enough, you can kind of get away with throwing him in that RB2 spot a lot of weeks, just because he is a pretty prolific pass catcher and he's very good in that role. So, yeah, I probably could have done better in that case, but I don't think I did terrible.
No. I think your explanation kind of brought me around to it a little more because from talking to Vinny briefly about Joe Mixon, he said that, you know, he thinks by week 5 Joe Mixon will be the guy, but they may phase him in a little bit more.
Okay.
So which to your strategy though is totally fine. Because CJ Procise could be good too. I just think that there could be weeks that he burns you. But again, Michael Thomas, Sammy Watkins, Fitzgerald, you know, Kenny Britt, these are all guys that are veterans that could have very big years, and some of them are, well, except for Michael Thomas. But I just really like that wide receiver core. I feel like that's enough to carry you. And then Phillip Rivers, I think, salvaged the whole thing as well at the end.
Yeah, I was very happy with the Phillip pick there.
Yeah, it's always good when that kind of works out that way. So then my question here was, does getting Rivers in the 13th as the 14th overall quarterback encourage you completely again this year to wait on quarterbacks in all of drafts?
Oh, yeah, completely. It's, you know, I said it before, like Rivers was the last quarterback taken, QB 14, and like Manning and Dalton and, you know, Stafford and these guys are still available. So, yeah, I don't see any reason really to go early on quarterback at this point.
Cool. All right. I mean, I kind of asked you the other questions in passing. So, I mean, if you don't have anything else in the team, let me see. Pierre Garcon, that was one thing I wanted to just kind of bounce off you. As opposed to him being drafted above Jamison Crowder. What's the thought process there?
That was tough, and I probably should have taken Crowder, honestly. Looking at some of the guys who went after him, I don't really know why I did that. I think my thinking was just volume. someone's got to catch passes there in San Francisco. And like,
yep.
I guess it's going to be Pierre Garçon. So like, if I'm taking, and maybe I should have gone for more upside with that pick just because I do have 3 wide receivers in front of him. But I figured, Sammy Watkins has injury history. Michael Thomas, is in his second year. Fitzgerald's going to fall off a cliff eventually. We just don't know where it is. And I think Pierre Garçon's very comfortable volume in PPR.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely don't disagree or hate the pick. I was just curious if there was, some sort of underlying, thought process there, but you kind of answered that.
Yeah, I think that's what it more or less was. I'd also just like to say I'm fucking high on Joe Mixon. That guy is like legit. I believe. And also, while he wasn't asked to pass block a lot in college, seemed to do okay with it when he did, which I mentioned earlier. I think it's the most underreported, underrated thing about like will rookie running backs play is that idea of can they pass block? Because that's what keeps talented running backs off the field for 3 downs more often than not. Joe Mixon can catch passes. He seems to be able to pass block at a decent level. And he's extremely talented. Marvin Lewis seems to love him. I will probably own a lot of Joe Mixon this year.
All right. Well, you heard it here. Walsh is fixing for some Mixon in 27.
What a catchphrase.
Yeah. Team name right there.
Fixing for some Mixon. That's good.
Yeah. All right. So you want to take over Vinny's 12th Bizarro Vinny, as I like to call him. This is a team that I've never seen Vinny draft like this ever.
Yeah, and the team ended up fucking sucking too. It's so bad. So Vinny went. He went Devontae Freeman, Jordy Nelson, Drew Brees, Jordan Reed, which is interesting. And then he went with Willie Snead, took 3 running backs in a row here, went Theo Riddick, Terrence West, Mark Ingram, and then went John Ross, Rashard Matthews, Mike Wallace, Charles Sims, Jalen Richard, Marquise Lee, and then defense. I like don't even know where to start with this. It's just a really oddly constructed team. Let's see, what questions did we have?
I don't know if I've ever seen anybody go running back, receiver, quarterback, tight end in like years.
Yeah, I mean Ed did it too, didn't he, with that one team?
No, I just mean like it's in that specific order.
Oh,
like just like stack, like going running back, tight and wide receiver, and then just following it right up with quarterback, tight end. I just feel like it's been a long time since I've seen that implemented.
I feel like as a fantasy football community, many people are past the stage of I need to fill my starting lineup right away.
Right.
And that's kind of what this draft felt like. But it's definitely weird. And Vinny admittedly hated this. So the first question we had was just why Breeze over Brady? Vinny said, I love me some Breeze, and I feel like he has more explosive weeks than Brady. So I went with that upside. That's fair. I mean, I would definitely go Brady over Breeze, but it's personal opinion.
Yeah, it's just I would go Brady over Breeze too. I just find it very funny that only 3 quarterbacks were taken before the 7th round, and Vinny took 2 of them on 2 separate teams.
Yeah, it's like
so strange.
It's anti-Vinny. It's like it's completely like opposite to what he's always done.
Regardless of quarterback late, though, I prefer Brady to Breeze, and I don't think Breeze should be going in the 3rd round. Like Rodgers, that happens in the 3rd, and you're like, okay, it's not for me, but like, okay, fine, whatever. But like, I don't like Breeze in the end of the 3rd at all.
No, nor do I. I don't think that's a good spot to be going after him.
Yeah, Brady would be way more justifiable in my opinion, but that's just
I also agree with that. The next question here was, are you comfortable with this wide receiver core? And just for reference, that wide receiver core is Jordy Nelson, Willie Snead, John Ross, Rashard Matthews, Mike Wallace, and Marquise Lee. And Vinny's answer was, no, this team fucking sucks. So Vinny did this poorly, and he is aware that he did it poorly. That's not the wide receiver core you want to end up with. I'm pretty high on Willie Snead this year. But man, like the like John Ross, Rashard Matthews, Mike Wallace, Marquise Lee, like you might get a total of like, in terms of like top 36 like wide receiver weeks, you might get a total of like 10 from those 4 guys combined. Yeah.
To take something constructive out of this, though, is to the point that we were just making about stacks, is that Vinny's team here would be a team that would need to hit home runs to have any shot of making the playoffs over the course of a season. So once you have Drew Brees, it's almost wise to take Willie Snead, just because any game that Willie Snead catches 2 touchdowns now, that could be the difference maker for you on a team that overall is not that good. I wouldn't necessarily, pair Mark Ingram with that 3 rounds later like he did. But, the point stands that if you find – God forbid you're in a real draft and you find yourself panicking and you're like, I hate what I've done in the first 4 rounds and you don't think it'll work out, then stack. That would be my advice. Yeah,
that's certainly a good point. I also think John Ross, that draft pick kind of speaks to that as well, where he's, going to be a home run hitter. He was a very, very fast person and can stretch the field. So I think that's a very good point. Let's go to the next question. Oh, why Riddick over Abdullah? Vinny did take Theo Riddick, I think like a round and a half before I took Abdullah or something like that.
Yeah. He was first pick of the 6th, and you got Abdullah. Oh, no, you got Abdullah later on in the round.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, never mind. So Vinny said he doesn't trust Abdullah to stay healthy or be a lead back, and Riddick gets a fuck ton of guaranteed passing work in a high-powered offense. I think that's fair. I just think this year is the ascendancy of Amir Abdullah as the lead back in there. So, I mean, differences of opinions. Riddick is probably a safer pick, but he certainly has way less upside.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
All right, and then let's see. Oh, the last 3 questions. Oh wait, no, the next 3 questions were all, what the fuck were you doing with this team, dude? And Vinny's answer to all 3 of those was, this team sucks and I am stupid. And the last question here from yourself, Rogers, was, did you take Marquise Lee with your last flex pick to be a fucking dick, or do you like his potential this year? And Vinny wrote, he was my last pick, dude. Suck my cock. So that's fine. That's a fine answer for me. I accept that wholeheartedly. Yeah, I think the lesson there is sometimes you just don't draft well.
Another layer to that lesson is mock, dude.
Yeah.
Everyone in the fantasy community should be mocking, because the only way that this is going to happen to everybody, you can only get a good feel of trends and value to do it 10 times a day at all hours of the day, every day until Labor Day weekend.
Yes, that is correct. Those exact words, those are correct. Yeah, I mean, it goes like, Vinny's a good fantasy football player, and like he just put together a team that totally sucked ass, which is like, it just happens sometimes. Try and get it out of your system like while you're doing mock drafts and stuff, rather than like your big money league that you're doing whatever for.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we just went like 2 hours on a mock draft, so kudos if you guys stuck through to the end of this. If you didn't, thanks for listening to part of it, even though you'll never hear this because you didn't stick to the end. You got anything on this, Rogers?
No, other than, just it's mock draft season. That's it. Learn from your mistakes and hopefully try and learn from ours as well, because they are certainly plentiful.
Oh yeah. We made lots of mistakes. Definitely learned from them. We should have, the copy of this draft, available like in the show notes or whatever.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, too, any listeners that have any additional questions for any other picks that we have, feel free to email us or tweet at us or pretty much anything, because we'd be more than happy to, emptily justify our picks further.
Yeah, totally. I like that guy. That's why. That's about it for us. So thank you guys again. We'll catch you next time, I guess. And, good night or good luck and good night, I guess.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.